I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty. I didn't prepare a prayer, but I'm just going to say, God bless us all and help the United States through this time.
Amen.
Amen.
7 p.m. This is a committee city-county merger, so it's welcome.
Thank you very much, Renee. And thank you to all of you for being here this evening. Very much appreciate it. This is a bit of our traveling roadshow team. This is part of the team that has been devoting a lot of time and effort to Amendment 5. And we're going to get into that discussion in just a moment. Just a couple of preliminary matters and some housekeeping things as well. There are some really great materials that are here tonight, and I think they're over there on that table over there. This is what we affectionately refer to as the Dennis Ganahl trifold that he and Byron put together with a lot of the information we have. This is a really great takeaway and is a very detailed takeaway, and our speakers will be referring to probably some of the information in this evening. In addition, another item that our speakers, I'm sure, will be referring to, because I see it's right in front of Representative Davidson here, is the Americans for Tax Reform map. And one of the reasons why we are talking about engaging in a phase down and eventual elimination of the income tax is because of this map of the country. And if you look at this map, and again, there's copies on here, it's also available online. This is a map that's been around for a long time. It is the work of Grover Norquist and Americans for Tax Reform, one of the oldest tax reform elimination operations in the country. They were literally birthed out of the Reagan Revolution. Grover at that time was a young Reagan campaign volunteer, and he did a ton of work with the president directly on tax policy and tax reform. And the president told him, you're a bright young man and you seem to understand all this. You should start your own organization. That's exactly what Grover did. He founded Americans for Tax Reform over 40 years ago. And this year, they're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the very famous Taxpayer Protection Pledge, which I believe both Bishop and Ben have signed probably multiple times in their legislative careers. And that's a very important key component, because I know there's a lot of fear about what may happen after Amendment 5. Well, these legislators who have literally signed a pledge not to raise your taxes are going to do exactly that. They're not going to raise your taxes. And we will eventually talk about that later. There's a lot of great information at ATR.org. In addition to this map, there's also a chart on the back as to what happened in Congress after the Taxpayer Protection Pledge was born 40 years ago. And they're having a big gala in D.C. in December, if any of you would like to join us on the celebration of the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. Grover was here with us in St. Louis last week, and he may be coming back once more before August the 4th, because he is that interested in Missouri possibly becoming yet another of the no income tax states. This map shows you what we're up against. If we sit still and continue to do nothing, then our neighboring competitive states, there's 8 of them, aspirations, like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and so eliminate the income tax in their states. The only one we don't have to worry about, which I think sometimes, honestly, makes us a bit lackadaisical here in the St. Louis region, is the People's Republic of Illinois. They're not going to eliminate their income tax, but I will point this out. They have had a flat income tax of 4.9% forever, and the leftist progressives in Illinois have tried to repeal that forever. And despite the craziness happening across the river, there's enough sanity left in the land of Lincoln that the voters of Illinois have rejected that effort every single time. So I don't think Illinois is going to go much below 4.95, but it looks like they're not going to increase that either. And that's something else to keep in mind. All of our other neighboring states are at our level or below, and many of them have already passed plans to eliminate their proposals, their income taxes. I'm going to introduce our panelists in a second. I just want to say Missouri is at an historic crossroads like I haven't seen in decades. And I was just speaking with my former House colleague, who then became a senator and is now running for county council, Andrew Koenig, who is the author of a lot of the legislation that we're going to discuss here tonight. Andrew was way ahead of his time. Andrew was proposing the elimination of the income tax and a transition to the consumption-based model which is the favorite model of many of the most famous conservative economists of the modern age. He was proposing that back in the 2010s as a young, I think he still looks young, he doesn't age much, as a young state representative, way ahead of his time. It took us a while. We're kind of slow in Missouri sometimes. We're very cautious. We're very careful. We're very thrifty to get to this point. But it is an historic point and an historic crossroads to be at. There's 2 other amendments as well on our ballot this year I think you all know about. We're not going to focus on them tonight, but many of us here and many of you all are working on them as well. Amendment 3 will be on our ballot in November to protect and save life and protect children from the gender mutilation industrial complex. But Amendment 4, which is very tightly and kind of intertwined in this overall discussion, is on the ballot as well. And I'll just say that having tried to get initiative petition reform across the finish line for almost a decade, Amendment 4 accomplishes everything that we've been working towards up to this point. None of these amendments are perfect, right? Because we're not perfect. We're human beings. And all of these amendments had to go through the legislative process. But I believe that all of these amendments are much better than anything that would be put on the ballot, as we've seen in recent years, by outside groups, special interests, and foreign billionaires who don't even reside in this country. Missouri has been the victim of over $35 million of foreign funding just in the last 10 years to pass things like Obamacare Medicaid expansion, to pass things like recreational marijuana, who many of my libertarian friends who like the marijuana thing don't like the amendment that was put in because it was put into the Constitution. It's 48 pages, and it basically created a monopoly structure for a couple of special interest big outfits, and like abortion on demand and gender-affirming care on demand, which was placed into our Constitution just 2 years ago, what many of us refer to as the bad Amendment 3. And so $34 million. We rank 4th in the country for out-of-state and foreign money that has flowed in here. Why is that true? Because it can. Because it's easy. There has not been a citizen-led conservative initiative since, Byron, 1980. We think the Hancock Amendment was the last time there was a truly conservative, truly successful initiative. The citizen-led process is not utilized by conservatives and won't be, but it will continue to be utilized by foreign, out-of-state, out-of-country leftist billionaire interests and all of their minions. All right, let's talk about taxes and tax policy. We got a great panel here tonight. I'll start down on the far end and work this way. Dennis Ganahl is the founder and the, what do you call yourself? The Grand Poobah of Mo Tax Relief Now? Yeah, MoTaxReliefNow.org. And again, all of these things I mentioned can be found online, and there's some great resources at Mo Tax Relief Now. Is it .org?
.org.
Yeah,
Right.
MoTaxReliefNow.org. Okay.
.org.
Dennis will be around afterwards. He's got materials I know out here as well. And Dennis has been working in the tax policy, tax reform, tax cut world for decades. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a professor, and he's a great communicator as well. And he has some personal stories. I'm not going to steal his thunder. He has some personal stories as to why he's working on this effort now. Next is Representative Ben Keathley, who is the chairman of the General Laws Committee. I kind of like that committee. I used to chair it in the House. He's the chairman of the General Laws Committee. He's from right here in the St. Louis region. He represents the area of predominantly Greater Chesterfield. And pardon him if he nods off because he's a new father as well. So he's got a newborn at home. Congratulations. Ben is an attorney like me. Don't hold that against us. There's a couple good ones out there. And I say, I probably embarrass Ben. I think he is a legislator's legislator. I think he's one of the smartest legislators in the General Assembly. He understands tax policy and complicated, complex economic issues like hardly any other. We're lucky to have him here in this region. And he gave some great speeches on the House floor about the importance of Amendment 5. And last but definitely not least, the fellow who, this is all his fault, he is the author of the former House Joint Resolution 173 and 174, which has become Amendment 5, Representative Bishop Davidson, who is doing yeoman's work of traveling the entire state. He's basically doing circles around the state. He probably doesn't know where he is on most days. And he has been at, 24 or more town halls and other such events. We added it up the other day. I think we're around 25, 26 town halls across the state, specifically on this issue, because it's that important. Not only to convince people to vote for it, but to express the importance of why this will transition Missouri into a much more productive, growth-oriented state, which we have not been. Bishop and I met many years ago down in Springfield and took a liking to each other because we like the same things, tax cuts and school choice, and he's been a friend ever since. He's been working on this issue. This is not something he just came to this year and said, oh, let's try to cut taxes. He's been working on this diligently for years, and he's had a lot of other various proposals that weren't quite ready for prime time, and he'll admit that, and that's why he wanted to work on this and get it right. And he had a lot of help in both chambers from a lot of other great reps and senators who are not here. And the final vote on this in the House with the final product was, I believe, 95 of your state representatives. You know, a strong majority approaching a supermajority. This was the governor's number one issue, number one priority this year. And I think you're going to see an overwhelming support coming not only from the Missouri Republican Party, which endorsed this proposal 2 weeks ago, but I think you're also going to see, I hope, unanimous support from our statewide delegation, our federal delegation. I'll just let you know that the first such endorsement came out today. Congressman Mark Alford from the Kansas City region has endorsed officially Amendment 5. So those are our panelists tonight. We're gonna break this down into explaining why eliminate the income tax, like why the focus on that tax. Why is it important to focus on that? And then we're going to talk about why this proposal, why Amendment 5, and what all does Amendment 5 do. And most importantly, as I mentioned, I am a recovering attorney, but I brought my attorney, Ben Keathley. He's going to dispel a lot of the myths and misconceptions about Amendment 5 that you may have heard on social media, such and so forth. All right. You know, Dennis, I think I'm going to start with you as our wise elder on the panel. I didn't call you old.
That's close.
And you've got some personal stories about why you're engaged in this. You're not an elected official. You probably could be in the Caymans right now, you know, retired and enjoying life. And instead, you're running all over the state of Missouri in the heat of the summer, which I think is going to start happening next week, talking about the importance of eliminating Missouri's income tax. Why is that so?
Well, on the personal note that I think Tim is talking about is my son lived in Chicago for 7 years, and last summer he got married. And so he calls me one night and he says, Dad, he says, we're going to move. And I said, thank God, I don't want you to live in Chicago anymore. And he said, I said, where are you going? And he said, well, I'm going to go to Tennessee or Florida. I said, Tennessee or Florida, why would you go there? I said, you don't have any family, you don't have anything. And he said, well, Dad, they don't have any income tax. I said, are you kidding me? I said, that's the only reason that you'll move away is for no income tax? He said, yeah. And I said, well, hell, if that's all it'll take, I'll go pass a zero income tax in Missouri. So he did move here last August, and we're expecting our first grandchild in October. So don't make me a liar, vote yes on Amendment 5. The other side of this is we started the organization primarily to give property tax relief to people. And 4 years ago, we worked with Ben Keathley to put together the senior property tax freeze, which many of you might enjoy right now. And you should know that it's never lost a vote anywhere. People have decided to support seniors from the beginning. In the House and in the Senate, in 2 years, we've had 2 bills passed. It only got 3 no votes. And I mean, that's out of almost 400 votes. Only 3 no votes. Every county that we've had to put it on the ballot has passed by a minimum of 75%, and we've had multiple counties pass it with 95%. So some of the concern we hear when we're going around the town halls is, well, what about the seniors? Are they going to get hurt? And my point is that you've already got these people here that have given seniors, through the senior property tax freeze, through the exemption on the Social Security, through the exemption on the public pension, through the exemption of capital gains, $1 billion in tax relief. They're not going to come back and hurt you now. It's just not in their DNA to do that. So this bill is going to be implemented in such a way that seniors will be not impacted in the slightest. Now you're going to hear a lot of fear-mongering that seniors are going to lose this and seniors are going to lose that. But here's the big thing for seniors that they need to consider. Your exemption on Social Security is only statutory. Your exemption on capital gains is only statutory. If you don't vote yes, any legislators can take it away from you at any time. This will codify those exemptions because it'll do away with the income tax. So if you don't vote yes, then you're putting your exemptions for Social Security and for public pensions and capital gains at risk.
Thank you, Dennis. 2 other quick things I should have mentioned. We have Oscar Harrell and James O'Brien here tonight. They are live streaming this event, so if you want to go back and watch it again or share it with your friends, it'll be at Show Me Sentinel Facebook page. So Show Me Sentinel. So I want to thank Oscar and James for being here tonight. They do great work. And we'll also be putting out some clips of the event as well. Finally, my lovely assistant, Byron Keelan here with Freedom Principle. He's also a partner in this effort, freedomprinciplemo.org. He has handed out index cards. We've learned through doing a multitude of these town halls that we get a lot of the same kind of questions. And so to avoid duplication and to get right to it and get right to the point, if you have a question, just fill it out on the index card and hand it to Byron. He's going to go through and rank them for us as far as, because like I said, we've heard a bazillion questions on this, so we kind of know what they might be before they get to it. But if we have follow-up questions, we want to answer as many as possible. So if you have a question, write on the index card, hand it to Byron. We also have a couple reps up front here. We have Cecily Williams and David Castile. David was the chairman of the committee that handled this measure several times. And I want to thank Cecily for her support as well. She was on the interim committee last year on property tax relief. And that is an important component of Amendment 5 that I think a lot of people may be missing. And we'll get to that as well. Ben and Bishop, why don't you both tell the folks here why the income tax? Why are we targeting the income tax for elimination? And then we'll get to the specifics of how we're doing that in Amendment 5.
Let's see here. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Bishop, and I'm from Springfield area. I was here, I guess, last week, and we'll be here in a couple weeks more in the area as well. We're working as hard as we can. And the why is an important question because I think a lot of times people talk about tax policy, and it can get a little bit staunchy, a little bit heady. It can a little bit dollars and cents and numbers and this and that. But when we're talking about that, when we're talking about economic growth, what we're actually talking about is real people. Real lives. In my opinion, it's the difference between someone having a dream and having a set of goals to actually accomplish that dream. Healthcare has increased in its cost. Education has increased in its cost. Housing is 4.5 times as expensive proportionate to income as it was 40 years ago. Wages have been stagnant. How many folks know someone that's complained about gas prices in the last week? How many people know someone who would like to buy a house, but because of the finances or inventory or whatever it is, they're just not quite able to pull that trigger? How many people know someone in their life, a young family, maybe has a couple kids, and they'd like to have more, but they're sitting there doing the math and they're wondering if it's financially responsible to do that? These are the stories of people in my life. A lot of these stories are from family members in my life. I'm one of 9 kids. I've got 11 nieces and nephews. I've got a lot of these young families surrounding me. And I'm watching them face these challenges just like so many other Missourians are facing these challenges. And so when we talk about the why, what we're really talking about is what is it that we want for an everyday Missourian? And what I want is them to be able to afford a mortgage. I want them to be able to afford a couple cars. I want them to be able to buy a used car for their 16-year-old. I want them to be able to put some aside for college and some aside for retirement. I'd like them to be able to also afford a $1,000 emergency expense. And to boot, I'd like them to be able to afford Netflix and Hulu, right? Because I want them to be able to enjoy life as well. But this is less and less the case. And our economy is crushing us more and more, and it's been slow for decades, and I'm worried it's going to get faster. And so when we talk about the why, I think it's important to remember we're talking about real people's lives. You get into the how of the bill, and you really have only 3 ways that you can eliminate income taxes. You can utilize excess revenue over time to buy down your rate over time. This is something we've been doing, actually. Speaker Jones was a big part of this. And it began in 2016, where we started to see the gradual elimination of income taxes as excess revenues were realized. And it was forecasted that we would lose $1.3 billion in that time. And income tax revenues went up $4.2 billion. That's because we were overtaxed. That's because revenues aren't actually tied to the rate that you tax. They're tied to the economic productivity of a people. And that was going down from 6% to 4.7% over the last decade. Growth is a good method, and it's a method that's in this bill, and we'll talk about that. But growth also takes somewhere in the ballpark of 25 to 30 years. So your second method is cuts, efficiencies in spending. And I've got a lot of folks back home, they say, well, Bishop, why are you talking about this or replacement revenue or the other thing? Why aren't we just cutting this out of the budget? Hasn't the budget increased all these dollars? Let's frame this out a little bit. All of your income tax dollars go into what's called a general revenue fund. That general revenue fund accounts for a lot of the discretionary spending in the state. The 5 big things that we spend out of that fund are K-12 education, Medicaid reimbursement rates, higher education, employee benefits, and then prisons. Those are all your $1 billion or more items. $7.8 billion of that $14-ish billion is income tax revenue. If you were to eliminate all K-12 spending, all of it, if you were to eliminate all higher education spending, if you were to close all 20 prisons and fire every correctional officer, you would still be $800 million short. And so I think tax spenders, such as your legislature, should always be held accountable, should always be held accountable to taxpayers, and should always be looking for prudent ways to spend those dollars efficiently. And I think that's a part of the equation, but it obviously can't be the whole. The third method is the method that we're probably here to talk about, and that is replacement revenue. That is replacing the revenue that would be lost from an income tax elimination. When you talk about replacement revenue, you get into this really great conversation. It's very interesting, very philosophical, has old conservative roots going back decades and decades, Grover Norquist among them. And what it is a question of which tax is less tolerable than the other tax. Which tax is worse? Because not all taxes are created equal. They have different effects. Some are more invasive of a person's privacy, for instance. Income tax is the only one that has to know your name, your social security number, your bank account number, how much you spent, where you got your money. But income taxes are also destructive to your economy. And it makes sense when you think about it. When you tax something, you actually get less of the thing you tax. If you tax cigarettes, you get less smoking. If you tax alcohol, you get less drinking. They had in one state a death tax, and guess what? They got less death. Literally. People died in other states. They just left the state to die. But they literally got less death inside of that state because what you tax, you get less of. When you're taxing income, you're taxing productivity. You're taxing creativity. You're taxing innovation. You're taxing a person's time. And you get less of that productivity, which is the true engine of economic growth. Economic growth happens when people take their time, their efforts, they take a risk, they create something, a product or a service, or they go ask for a raise or whatever it is, right? They put their shoulder into something and they make something more out of what's in front of them. And right now, we're penalizing that behavior. But income taxes aren't just destructive to your economy, they're also not very transparent. And I don't mean not transparent as in a lot of Missourians don't know how much they pay in income taxes because it's withheld. That's a whole different thing to talk about. I'm talking about not transparent. Every single good and service that you purchase, part of that cost is income taxes. Every single good and service that you enjoy, part of that price is the income tax being passed on to you. And in fact, if it has a long production line, whatever it takes to build one of these cups and then manufacture it and then distribute it and then retail it, at every single step of the way, its price is increased because of the income taxes that are baked into the cost of that. It's not transparent. And what happens when you have a government that generates revenue untransparently? It grows. It's no coincidence that our government, since the invention of income taxes, has ballooned over the last 100 years. And so it's not very transparent. It's also not very fair. The $7.8 billion pot that we're talking about, the income tax revenues, that's paid for by 2.8 million Missourians. There are 43 plus million non-Missourians that travel in and out of Missouri every year. If we were to, say, look at something like consumption taxes, like sales taxes, I think it's more fair that those people who are also enjoying the goods and services of Missouri pitch into those goods and services. You tell me what sounds more fair, $7.8 billion funded by 2.8 million Missourians, or $7.8 billion funded by 46 million plus people. A more fair, a more transparent, a less destructive tax to the economy are consumption taxes. Income taxes are also less voluntary. And what I mean is that you can't choose whether or not you earn a living. You can choose what it is you consume. And so these are some of the reasons, as you talk about replacement revenue, why income taxes are, in my opinion, especially atrocious, especially terrible, and consumption taxes are tolerable. So you get into the legislation, and it's got 2 sections. You got 3 ways to eliminate income taxes. Those 2 sections are this. The first section says we have to. It's a constitutional guarantee. It's a constitutional shall. The legislature shall enact legislation eliminating income taxes, utilizing excess revenues over time to buy down our rates. Instead of excess dollars, when we get more dollars than we think, coming in and growing the coffers of the state, we think it should go back into the pockets of Missourians. And this constitutional amendment guarantees that. It actually doesn't do anything on consumption tax as a guarantee. That's a constitutional possibility. But what it guarantees is that over time your income tax will be eliminated. And then my favorite part is once it's eliminated, it'll remain eliminated. Constitutionally protected that we will be a 0% income tax state. The second section is the part that's a constitutional possibility. It's a constitutional may. And it says that the legislature can have a very guardrailed conversation around sales taxes, around consumption taxes. And those 4 guardrails are important. What they say is it has to be for the purpose of eliminating income tax and reducing local tax rates. 1, if we were to do anything to consumption taxes at all that would result in either an expanded base or an increased rate. 2, it has to be revenue neutral or less. It cannot generate a new dollar for the government. The government cannot grow from this. It cannot get more money. At worst, it has to be revenue neutral. 3, it has to be in the same piece of legislation. And 4, it has to be enacted within 5 years of this constitutional amendment passing. Now, those 4 guardrails, they create a framework, which is what we like in our Constitution, is frameworks for statutory bills to be passed. Now, this framework, once you start to do the math, it creates a very predictable framework for that statutory bill to exist in. Where it goes from there, you can kind of reverse engineer. It's a big math equation. Reverse engineer what kind of statute we're talking about. And basically what you come up with is 4 variables, this big math equation with 4 variables. And those are these. What is the date that the income tax rate reaches 0? When does it actually get to 0%? Is it 2032? Is it 2034? What is the base, or the things which are able to be taxed with a sales tax? What's the base or the range of things that can be taxed? Right now we have 200 plus exemptions, 200 plus loopholes in our sales tax code, a lot of which are codified by the Constitution. Only about 1/3 of the economy has a sales tax on it. 100% of the economy is being influenced by income taxes, right? It's being taxed by income. But about 1/3 is being taxed by sales tax right now. The second variable, or the third variable rather, is the rate, the sales tax rate that you have. And then the fourth variable is the revenue picture. What does this do to the state revenue? Is it revenue neutral, which means they don't lose $1, they don't gain $1? We know they can't gain $1 because of the constitutional amendment. Or is it revenue less? And here's what I'll tell you. You can just do the math. And the math bears out this way. If you wanted to eliminate income taxes by 2032, 0% by then, and if you wanted to have a revenue neutral picture, doesn't do anything to state revenues whatsoever, and you had as wide of a sales tax base as possible. I say as possible because there are federal exemptions that are required, about half of health care, food, gasoline, nonprofits. Airfare is a federal exemption. You take out some of these base exemptions that necessarily have to be exempted, but then broaden it as widely as possible otherwise. What you're looking at on your rate is 4.97%. That's not 4.97 new percent on top of your 4.225. That's from 4.225 to 4.97%. And I've heard 18% or 17% or 13% or 20%. That is not what the math says. And I don't think anyone even bothered to do math when they're saying those numbers. I think they're just against giving power back to the people in the form of a more transparent, fair tax. And as you look at those levers and you move one, you start to move the other. So if you say, I want more exemptions, okay, we're going to push out our timeline, we're going to push up our rate, or we're going to take a hit on our revenues. And that's the mathematical equation. That's the framework that we have to operate within because of this constitutional amendment. There's a lot more pieces to it, but I wanted to give a little bit of why and a little bit of legislation, and I know that Representative Keathley is going to pick up a few other pieces that are really important to remember as well.
Ben, let's talk about how you got to, you're very critical and meticulous when it comes to tax policy, and I know you put a lot of time and effort into the drafting of this. And by the way, folks, there's copies of it up here, the joint resolution. It's not a omnibus 800-page bill. It's 2.5 pages. Yeah, 697 words. The whole thing is 2.5 pages. And there's copies up here available. Ben, how did you come to support this? And why do you believe this is the best vehicle to move forward to eliminate Missouri's income?
Well, the why is that it's critical that we that we do. And I think a lot of the explanation has been there in terms of what it can do for Missouri and also what it's going to do to help us keep pace and compete and again, put Missouri back to the forefront from where we are when we're competing for businesses to come in and jobs to come into our state and people to move into our state and being a place where people want to live, being a place where people want to work. We don't want people going to Tennessee, Florida, and Texas and looking at states that happen to all have zero income tax. That's why it's critically important. And Bishop talked about how ending one of probably what is the single biggest invasion of privacy issues we have in our government, which is the Missouri state income tax return. Every dollar you earn, every dollar you make, every dollar you invest, every dollar you spend, they want to know where it all comes from. We can get rid of that. So just all that why is important. And I think it's important that Tim said that that the bill is available. If you leave here with nothing else, I hope you'll listen to us. But if you leave here with one thing, let it be this. Do not listen to what the Post-Disgrace or the Kansas City Star or the media is telling you about. They all like the income tax. They're not opposed to higher sales tax. Have you ever known the Post-Dispatch to care about higher sales tax rates? You think they care now when they say, oh, if you vote for this, you're going to pay this astronomical sales tax. Right, Bishop just told you what the math says. That's not true. They just don't want you to eliminate the income tax. Don't listen to them. And I'm not even telling you to listen to me. I'm saying if you leave here with one thing, let it be this. Read the bill for yourself. It's 2 pages of constitutional guardrail language of restrictions that we are going to put on the legislature and on government on saying we are going to require you to eliminate the income tax and these are the parameters under which you are going to do it. This is what you are allowed to do. This is what you are not allowed to do, most importantly, in terms of going about it. But the one thing you will do is you shall eliminate the income tax, and once it's eliminated, it shall stay eliminated forever. That's what we need to do when voting for Amendment 5. That's what's in there. And so if you leave with nothing else, read the bill. It's not a long read. It's not a big omnibus bill, like Tim has said. This is an easy bill to pick up, read, and understand what's in there. The other thing you will see in there is the local tax component. One thing I hear everywhere is, well, that's just great. Yeah, I'd rather not pay income tax. But what about my property taxes? Can't you guys do more about property tax? I'm getting squeezed on that. Amendment 5 presents our single greatest ability and option to make serious headway towards reducing our property taxes and local taxes. How is that? Because it's not just state government that's going to be able to grow its economy and grow a tax base by closing sales tax loopholes. Most of your sales tax is actually charged by the local governments. If you are in St. Louis County right now, you pay more closer. Bishop said you pay a 4.225% sales tax. Some of you are probably sitting there, I think I pay a lot more than that. 4.225 is what you pay to the state of Missouri in sales tax. You all know you pay more than that. You pay closer to 10%. If you're shopping in Chesterfield Valley, where we have all these overlapping special taxing districts, it's closer to 11%. You're paying 10%. What you're doing is you're paying essentially 4% to the state and 6% to the local governments. What Amendment 5 does is when Missouri goes up from, we go from 4 to 5%, not to 15, not to 16, 4 to 5. But what happens on the other side? Because those closed loopholes, expanding the sales tax base, helps the local governments too. There's money that they're realizing because they're taxing things that they weren't getting to revenue from before. Amendment 5 says just like Missouri, the state of Missouri has to trade every dollar we get in expanded sales tax base, in new consumption tax, has to be returned to the taxpayers through income tax cuts. Well, how do the local governments have to do it? Because they're required to do it too. They can't get more revenue off of an expanded sales tax base. They have to stay revenue neutral too, virtually revenue neutral. How do they get it? Their revenue comes from property tax and sales tax. And it's right there on page 3 of this bill. You will see it right there. We're not hiding the ball. Local governments are required to reduce their sales tax rate and reduce their personal property tax rates and reduce their real property tax rates and reduce their earnings tax rates in order to make up and stay revenue neutral on the bill. That means, what does that mean? While you might be going from 4 to 5% on Missouri sales tax, you're going to be going from 6% to 5% on your local tax. You all can do that math right now. You're paying about a 10% sales tax right now. What do you care if you're paying 4 to the state and 6 to the local? I don't care. I don't care if I'm paying 4% to the state and 6 to the local, or 5 to the state and 5 to the local. At the end of the day, I'm still paying 10%. That is how Amendment 5 works. It's not just the state that can realize the expanded sales tax base revenue. It's also the local governments. and they have to reduce their sales tax rates and their property tax rates in order to ensure they stay revenue neutral, which means the effective sales tax rate that you pay at the point of sale is more or less the same to what you pay now. We just pay a fair tax on all things. All things are taxed same. I'm an attorney right now. That means right now I'm exempt from sales tax. My clients don't pay sales tax. They certainly pay the income tax. I pass that on to them, because I have to pay a tax bill of 4.7% on the income tax, just like everyone else does on their paycheck. I pay that. It doesn't show up as a line item, again, not transparent. It doesn't show up as a line item on my bill to my clients. But make no mistake, I'm not eating that cost. I know that bill is coming every April, and I'm going to get them. That's how every business owner operates. But right now, it's not transparent. Let's make that transparent on the bill. Let's end the tax returns that everyone has to do and stop this system of double taxation that squeezes you once when you're getting your paycheck, squeezes you again when you go to buy things, squeezes you again when the person who got your money that you bought things from has to go pay their income tax. And let's just tax it one time at the point when you buy stuff. That is a fair tax system. It puts Missourians in control of what their tax burden is and ultimately encourages economic growth rather than punishing productivity and labor. But the other thing is, on the local side, it gives us a real avenue whereby we can reduce our real property taxes, we can reduce our personal property taxes, and we can reduce the local sales tax, which effectively will keep the sales tax you're paying right now the same, just you don't have an income tax anymore. Tim, you asked why I came to support it, because this is like a 3-4-for-1 tax situation. You can eliminate some of the most harmful taxes like personal property tax we can reduce, we can fully get rid of the income tax, and we can keep just the taxes that put us in control. I can't control what I make. At least I don't want to have to reduce what I make in order to not lessen my tax burden. I can control what I spend, and I can control what I spend on. I can control where I shop. You have a lot more choices, a lot more options as a taxpayer in the consumption side of the equation. You have no choice on the productivity and labor side. Taxing people's paycheck is anti-liberty. Giving people the choice and the options to have a better impact and better choices on better decision-making on what their consumption rates are and what they're buying is more pro-liberty. That's why I came to support Amendment 5, Tim.
All right, I think from what you both just explained, the rate, the total rate, state and local taxes before Amendment 5 or after Amendment 5 will largely be the same and could even be in some cases lower because of all the guardrails and the restrictions here. And wouldn't it be political suicide and economic insanity for this legislature, which is going to be drafting the follow-up because of the narrow 5-year window? Wouldn't it be absolutely crazy for you all to propose a sales tax rate that would be meteorically higher than all of our neighboring states? That would kind of make the whole point ridiculous, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Based off of what that framework kind of creates in those 4 variables, we can be confident that we're going to land somewhere between 2032 and 2036 on that implementation. Somewhere between a range of necessities which are exempted from that base, somewhere between a 5 and 6% rate, because like you said, Kansas has a 6.5% rate, Illinois has a 6.25% rate.
Sales tax.
Sales tax, that's right. And then a revenue picture of probably $0 to $500 million is sort of what I'm thinking. And that's based off of the guardrails that are in the constitutional amendment if you just reverse engineer that math.
So there will be absolutely no proposal by this legislature to have a double-digit sales tax rate, and in fact, it won't be anywhere near that. Can you say that with confidence?
Yes. One, because there is a real constitutional, and again, Amendment 5 is about putting guardrails and checkpoints on the legislature. It's not a bunch of authorizations to do whatever we want with tax. It's very much not that. Read it. You will see we are not allowed to get more revenue without going back, without a vote of the people, just like it works right now. We have to stay revenue neutral. We can cut, but we can't use this system to grow more revenue and grow government in the process. The idea is to grow the economy. So that's the constitutional limit, and Bishop went through those numbers. If you want to replace all the income tax revenue, that puts you at the 4.9%, maybe a little higher depending on if you want to exempt groceries or medical services or various other parts of services that you don't want to bring into that. But there just isn't there isn't the math. There isn't enough money that we get to replace to support these higher tax rates. But then there's also the practical cap that you're getting at, Tim, which is the states around us all have their sales tax rates. If we want these businesses to come to Missouri, realistically, we can't just say eliminate the income tax and then make the sales tax something that gives them all sticker shock and doesn't get them to move across. We have to understand our major economic engines are border cities. That means if you are in Kansas City and you want to attract businesses, it's not just about having a zero income tax. Your sales tax rate has to be lower than what Kansas is. And if you're in St. Louis, our sales tax rate has to be lower than what the Illinois sales tax rate is. Fortunately, the math works out where we can stay well under those sales tax rates of those states while also having zero income tax.
Let's talk about our sales tax system itself. And from what I've heard you all describe and everything that has been discussed about this, one of the main reasons that we have to do this constitutionally through a constitutional amendment is because our system of sales taxation in this state is completely broken. It has not been modernized. It's extremely antiquated. It's full of hundreds of special interest carve-outs, loopholes, and exemptions. And people say, well, where did those come from? Well, they came from my understanding the last 40, 50 years of lobbyists and consultants and special interests. Hey, I don't blame them. They went up and they got theirs from the legislature. And this happened over decades, right? We also have a tax credit system, which takes $500 million off of the top line and only benefits a few very wealthy people in the state of Missouri. We also have modern technology, right, that wasn't foreseen decades ago. I have heard that the overall system of taxation in our state, especially regarding sales tax, has not truly been overhauled and updated in well over 75 years. Would you guys talk about the sales tax system and how that needs to be changed?
Yes, I saw a few surprised faces in the crowd when I was talking about how I don't charge sales taxes as an attorney. That's one of those constitutional protections. The state of Missouri right now is constitutionally prohibited from putting sales tax on services like attorney services or other similar services like that. Why is it that we treat buying a shirt from a retail store? Why is that a taxable event? But buying, but paying for a CPA or an accountant service or a lawyer service is somehow not just not taxed, but constitutionally protected from ever being taxed. When we're talking about consumption taxes, we're not talking about putting huge rates on things we already buy. We're talking about a fair system and closing those loopholes.
Yeah, and it's, that speaks to, that's section 26 of Article 10 that has passed. This microphone's being on.
Here, try this one. Maybe not cut us out.
Yeah, and that speaks to, I think, one of the biggest reasons why it needs to be a constitutional amendment. I had someone ask me at a town hall recently, they said, so why aren't you just going after all these loopholes and closing those loopholes and eliminating income taxes that way? And I said, that is what we're doing. It takes a constitutional amendment to do just that. That's exactly what we're doing. We did the math without going constitutional. We did the math without closing those constitutional loopholes, and it was totally unreasonable. It's not a workable solution. You have to address this systematic fundamental problem if you want to address this problem quickly. The other two reasons it's a constitutional amendment, which I think are really important, is that if we use growth alone over time, because that's the constitutional guarantee, it's kind of our safety net, as it were. Well, that takes 25 to 30 years. I want to trust something more than legislative conviction over 25 to 30 years. I want to see a constitutional amendment that requires the legislature do that. And then the third reason is I don't want to see the income tax ever come back in the future. I don't want to see it come back in 20 years. I don't want to see it come back in 50 years. I don't want to see it come back in 60 years. If we constitutionally protect the people from an income tax being levied on them, that's the greatest chance we have of making sure that it stays gone once it is gone.
Got one more question for Ben, and then I want to bring in Dennis back into the conversation, because Dennis, I want you to talk about not comparing Missouri to Florida and Texas, because I think that's a little bit of apples to oranges, but comparing us to Tennessee, a state that is does border us, does have a border with us, has never had an income tax, and I want you to talk about the comparisons that you've looked at there. But Ben, before we get to that, you did another math equation on the House floor. I heard this during the discussion back in the spring, and you talked about what an average Missouri family of four would have to spend post Amendment 5, pursuant to everything you just discussed, in order to somehow have an excess tax burden of what they have now. And it's an astronomical number, but I think it's absolutely accurate from my examination of that and then doing the math myself. So what does that look like, if you remember that conversation?
I do, yeah. So the average Missourian right now pays about $1,500 in income tax each year. $1,500. So in order for you, so it bears reason, right, that if you're the average Missourian spending $1,500 a year on your income tax, that's what they're taking out of your paycheck, then you don't want to have to go to a system where you're going to be spending more than $1,500, more than what you're currently paying on income tax on anything new that's coming down the pike, right? On anything else that, when we close these loopholes, ultimately, well, yeah, that's fair for the businesses, but I want to make sure I'm not paying more. $1,500, if we're assuming like we're talking about here, a tax rate on things, again, like lawyer services, like CPAs, like your lawn care workers, services predominantly is what we're talking about. Assuming a tax rate that goes onto those of that 5%, somewhere in that 5 to 6 range, at $1,500 before you get there, you would have to purchase over $30,000 of services. On lawn care workers, on contractors, $30,000 to get back to what your current income tax burden is if you're the average Missourian. I doubt there are very many average Missourians out there who are paying $1,500 and then turning around and spending over $30,000 or $40,000 on services alone. I don't know how that income breakdown works. So the idea so if you're asking yourself, am I going to end up better off from this? Just from a sheer math side on which system has you paying more taxes, you're already better off. And that's before we ever even account for the fact that we get economic growth, that businesses are going to have more money to put back, which means more money for employees, means more money for paychecks, more jobs, and more businesses coming back into Missouri. The White House put out a report, their economic report, estimated that, what was it, $2,700 is what the average wage would increase from eliminating the income tax. That's not counting the 4.7% automatic raise you get simply because government stopped stealing 4.7% of your paycheck. That is an additional $2,700 a year every Missourian would look to get just because there's more money in their company's bottom line from everyone in their company not having to pay the income tax.
Dennis, talk about Tennessee. Talk about Tennessee 30, 40 years ago compared to Missouri versus now. I want you to talk about that. I want you to talk about their system of taxation, which I think everybody knows. They have no income tax. They've never had an income tax. In addition, in the last 10 years, they've eliminated other taxes on labor and production, right? They had something called the Hall tax, which was a tax on investment income. They've eliminated that. They've eliminated their death tax. They've eliminated their inheritance tax. They've eliminated just about everything you could possibly have on labor and production. They've eliminated. I also found out, I was surprised to learn this, they have one of the lowest property taxes in the country, and their sales tax is not 25%. It's not 20%. It's not 15%. It's not 10%. Their state sales tax is 7%. So how does Tennessee do it? And because they've done it, what has that done to their growth versus Missouri's over the last several decades?
Well, as Tim has alluded to, I'm the oldest one on the panel here. So I used to drive through Tennessee to go visit our family in Atlanta, and it was a 2-lane highway. It was a 2-lane right through all the towns that you had to go through to get into Tennessee. It was all 2-lane highway. And you could find a motel on the side of the road. It was far different than it is today. Now you can hardly drive through it. It's so busy. So I've seen that part of Tennessee. One of the reasons that people supported the senior property tax freeze was because they wanted seniors to keep their homes. And one of the sale points we had was that, hey, look, do you want to keep the grandparents close to the families, or do you want the grandparents to have to move out? Because I was getting notes from women and men that were saying, Dennis, they're taxing me out of my home. And it's just really tragic stories. And so the goal was for the legislature and everybody else was to keep seniors in their home, to keep their families intact. Well, what we have in Missouri right now is, from my story, my son, is our families are not intact. There's a study called the U-Haul study, and it measures where U-Hauls are moving and going. We've got more people moving to Tennessee, I can promise you, than Tennessee's moving to Missouri, right? That's not the case. When I grew up, there was basically 2 cities in Tennessee, Memphis and Nashville, and you had Kansas City and St. Louis, so we were pretty comparable there. We had comparable populations. I think the roads were less than Missouri roads at that time, having driven through them through the 60s and early 70s. Today, Tennessee has 1 million more people than we have. Missouri's population has grown less than 1% for 113 years. Think about that. We haven't had any population boom. Our kids are moving away, and our kids are moving away because they don't have financial opportunity. They don't have. At one time, I used to have a business in downtown St. Louis. We were talking about it with Tim Bosch. Well, and I had my business in downtown St. Louis. At the time, they had 12 corporate headquarters. How many corporate headquarters do we have now in Missouri? I think 1, maybe Worldwide Technology. Maybe there might be another 1 or 2. And Tim was telling me, well, one time we had 24. And he was telling me that he worked for AT&T, and the reason AT&T, that big building that we just sold for $2 million, and now we're giving tax incentive financing for somebody to put it into housing of some sort. They moved because of taxation. That's why they moved, the income tax and the earnings tax. That's why they moved out. So that was a corporate headquarters that we lost. So the point is that Missouri can't sit here. To do nothing is not a plan. To do nothing is not a plan. You have to do something to have a plan. And if you want a plan to have your families intact, and you want a plan to give your kids better educational opportunities, you want a plan to have them stay in town because there's good jobs after they graduate, then what you have to do is start taking a look at what are the things we can do to attract that. And the number one thing we can do, we know because we've got success records, right? We know that states are doing this, are being successful. And Ben assures me, and Bishop assures me, that we have a better plan going to 0% income tax than any state that's implemented it so far. This because we've been able to learn from 9 other states, and we're able to learn from the other states that are implementing it. So we've got a better plan that's customized to Missouri. So my suggestion to you is, if you want to have your families intact, and you want to keep Missouri get Missouri on a growth pattern instead of a decline pattern, then you have to vote yes on Amendment 5.
All right, let's start ticking through questions here. And if you have any questions, Byron's got more here. I'm going to get through as many as possible. And then after we finish up, all the panelists will hang out. And if you didn't have something quite answered the way you wanted answered, if you want to interrogate them further, you can come up and do that after we finish. All right, let's start with a quick one here. Short question. It may be a longer answer. But in what ways will Amendment 5 affect the local sales tax rates, city, county, fire, police, ambulance?
Yeah, and I see that you've got a lot of cards there, and so I think we're going to try to go quickly through these questions to get as many answers as possible. As far as local rates, the way that it works, if a taxing subdivision uses a sales tax and its base, which is the things that are taxed, is expanded because the state expands that sales tax base to eliminate income taxes, then necessarily that local taxing subdivision gets more money. Well, we don't want them to get more money. We want them to have the same amount of money. And so instead of them getting that more money, they have to roll back the sales tax rate within that taxing subdivision, or the personal property tax rate, or the real property tax rate, or in the instance of St. Louis City and Kansas City, their earnings tax rate. And so those excess dollars have to roll back other local tax rates. And so that's how it affects that local sales tax.
Well, what's excess? So I understand the amount you're spreading it, but if, say, you're taking in $1 million in sales tax, and then all of a sudden now you're taking in 2 because of the expansion, how far do you roll it back? Because how do you determine what was actual growth in the sales tax base and what's not?
So two ways to answer that. One is the constitutional amendment says 97%, and so it accounts for an inflationary adjustment. And the second thing is that all sales taxes go to the Department of Revenue, and so they can actually bifurcate and say these are from the old sales tax base, and these revenues are from the new expanded sales tax base. That way we know how much of that sales tax base came from, or those revenues came from that new base versus the old one. Thank you.
Okay. A couple questions on radio ads, and I know there's a lot out there, and I am in radio on NewsTalkSTL. I can tell you that there are some pro radio ads coming, and there's also been a lot of TV ads and streaming ads and all kinds of ads. So it kind of depends on what medium you're listening to. But this question's about the radio ads. The radio ads claim seniors are going to get hit hard. Taxes will be added on just about everything, including home sales. The ads are slick and effective. What is your response to them? And secondly, so two-part question, this person knows where the money's coming from. The realtors are putting millions of dollars into No on 5. Why? And how do we counter? So, seniors are going to get hard. There'll be a tax on everything. And why are the realtors funding us?
I think one of the only times I've ever lost my cool on the House floor was actually when lies like these were being told on the House floor. And it actually made me very angry. I'm not usually a person disposed to becoming angry that way. But when it comes to some of these things, like the high rates or whatever it might be, it's flatly untrue. So for real estate, for instance, there is Section 25 of Article 10 prohibits sales taxation on real estate transactions, 1. 2, we have a governor who has said he will not sign a bill that taxes such things, right? And 3, for whatever it's worth, the math has never once been done to even know. It's not ever been included in the base at all. I don't even know how much real estate consumption occurs in this state because it's not even a part of the mathematical.
Anybody want to add something? Yeah.
I'll say something on the real estate part. I mean, you are paying inflated real estate prices right now because the realtor who sells your home, they're doing the math on this income tax on their commission as well, just like any other business owner is. The embedded taxation hits every industry because we all pay taxes
Hey, ma'am,
on our payroll.
could you please quiet down? People are having trouble hearing. Okay, whoever's chattering and grumbling, please quiet down because we're trying to have a discussion up here, okay? And we're trying to get through as many questions as possible. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. That's good. Go ahead.
On the senior part, I'll talk on that, or you talk on that, either way.
What?
Seniors. He asked about seniors. Do you want to talk about seniors or me talk about seniors?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, on the seniors piece, because I want to make sure that we hit that as well. Ben speaks to it a little bit here, in that seniors are currently paying income taxes. It's not on their income. They're paying the income tax of every good and service which they consume already. There is a very real way. Those seniors who we're concerned about most are seniors who are on the lower side of the income, or on the economic spectrum, right? They have less revenue, less money in their pocket. If your sales tax code is concentrated on 1/3 of the economy, mainly goods, who do you think consumes more goods? Those who have less income or those who have more income? It's those with less income. Who do you think consumes more services? Those with more income or those with less income? It's those with more income. If we're worried about seniors, and the seniors we're worried about are definitely the ones who are disproportionately consuming goods instead of services, by broadening the sales tax rate, we're able to make it more fair, and that's how we do the math in figuring out a way to actually see lower sales tax rates overall. So I think there's a very real way to see money in everyone's pockets now because of equalizing and spreading out the burden of our economic generation, of our revenue generation in the government. But I would go further and say, I think the best thing you can do for seniors in Missouri, the best thing you can do for them financially, the best thing you can do for them physically, the best thing you can do for them emotionally and spiritually, is keeping their kids and grandkids in the state of Missouri. Right now, the average age of Missouri is going up, and it's because young people are leaving. And they're leaving because of stories like Dennis's son. They're leaving because there are economic opportunities elsewhere. And if you want a state that can, for the long haul, look after those who need genuine help, then you need a state that has its own economic activity to generate revenue to continue those services into the future.
Let me just read this note so that y'all don't think I was telling you a lie. Here's a note that I got from a woman who's a member of MoTax Relief now on June 1st, 2026. She says, Dennis, my family moved here from Maryland 6 years ago. My son has joined us from South Carolina. A Missouri with no income tax presents opportunity of a brighter future for my two 20-something sons, Cindy Jones, Salem, Illinois. I mean, it's not a one-off. I'm not a one-off story. All of you know family members that have moved away because they can't find good jobs.
All right, the next question, I know, Bishop, you've got this thing memorized, but I found the section. There's a question about this specific section, which I think is section 3, sub 2. Notwithstanding the provisions of subdivision 1 of this subsection to the contrary, no political subdivision shall adjust its local tax rates in a manner that results in any reduction in funding to any public schools within or serving such political subdivision. So the query cites that section, and then they ask, it looks like it removes the tax credit given by city, county to businesses on the school portion. It looks like we lose part of the senior tax credit. Is that true? Or does it refer to something? What does that section refer to, and what does it do?
Yeah, that is a subsection, or a subdivision rather, of a subsection of a section. Well, no, it matters kind of how it fits into the constitutional amendment, right? And so what that is,
we're on page 3. Right?
Yeah,
page 3.
Yeah, page 3. What that is relating to. It's right in the middle of page 3. What that is relating to are those adjustments that local governments would have to make if the sales tax base was expanded. So if the sales tax base was expanded, local governments now have to take that expanded revenue and roll back rates. They can roll back real property or personal property rates, but only insofar as it is those real property and personal property tax rates that affect that political subdivision. They can't roll back the property tax rates that affect the school district political subdivision. And so that's what that provision.
And when I asked the question was like when a city gives a tax credit, so therefore encourage a business to come in, they don't have to pay any school tax, all this. The way I was interpreting it was that the school portion, they couldn't do that anymore. That the way this is worded, and I've asked several lawyers, and they're all like, well, let the courts decide.
Yeah, I would say this is pertaining to this subdivision and the specified rollbacks within subsection 2 of section 26.
I just was trying to get clarification because nobody could seem to answer my question.
So I'm thinking your question is that it's if it's saying that they shall adjust its local tax rates in a manner. So you're saying that they don't.
A political subdivision can't affect.
Right. So I think the part where we're talking past each other is counties collect the tax for the local public school district. They don't set the rate. The rate is set by the levies through the voters by the district, right? The county is just doing it. But the county has to roll back in what this is coming in the section that comes right after where it's within the same section that says if you are getting the expanded sales tax base, you have to reduce property tax rates or you have to reduce sales tax rates. The county is sitting on the property tax that they have to remit to the school districts. This is just ensuring that the county gets to charge a sales tax. School districts don't get to charge a sales tax. So the school districts aren't getting any expanded sales tax base on anything we do with services. The county can't take money from the school district by rolling back their property tax rates while keeping their property tax. That's all that does.
The question was about the tax credits. So you're saying this doesn't have any...
Yeah, it wouldn't affect that because that portion of the Constitution that it applies to, and it's only within that section, has nothing to do with tax credits.
Well, that's what it says is this entity, public entity, can't affect, the school.
Notwithstanding the provisions of subdivision 1 is the first part. So it says it only applies to that one subdivision.
Trying to get clarification, and nobody could clarify that for me.
Well, that's why we.
It's also.
Let's talk about the state auditor's report. State auditor Scott Fitzpatrick came out with a report recently that was critical of Missouri's overall budget, potential deficits, spending, etc. The question is, the state auditor says we have a structural deficit of $66 million in 2026 and potentially $1.7 billion in 2027. This would require cutting spending or raising taxes. I would prefer cutting spending. How will this be addressed by the legislature? This sounds like a way to continue the spending that would otherwise have to be cut. So, state auditor's report and the budget issues. And I forgot to mention earlier, Bishop is the vice chair of the House Budget Committee.
Yeah, so the state auditor's report You know, I think it's pretty accurate. I had done the math myself, and I said 1.771 billion was sort of my number. And the way that our budget works in Missouri, we have a balanced budget amendment. Those cuts have to happen. Hopefully we do the responsible thing of making them in the legislature. Worst case scenario, it will be withheld by the governor. And so that's what is possible. The budget challenges are independent from Amendment 5. Amendment 5 doesn't fix that. It doesn't exacerbate the problem in the short term. It doesn't do anything to the budget. Because Amendment 5 is not allowed to generate any new revenue, it has to be revenue neutral or less. It can't be a solution to the budget. The solution to the budget doesn't have a quick fix or an easy path forward. The solution to the budget is going back and prudently asking hard questions about whether or not this is generating the greatest value for tax dollars or isn't. It's an independent problem, though, from Amendment 5, and it'll have to be independently addressed. Amendment 5 won't have any effect on that one way or the other.
Corporate, it's kind of a corporate tax question that relates to sales tax. There are a lot of corporate tax exemptions from income tax to give companies a tax break. Will these companies be in favor of increasing their taxes via a consumption tax?
So really, it's all taxes are ultimately paid by a consumer. It's all embedded into what you're doing. I think it's going to, the question is a corporation going to be in favor of the consumption tax?
Yes.
So
yes. Will companies be in favor of increasing their taxes? I guess that's presuming they would, via a consumption tax.
So it's not increasing the overall tax burden. We can't increase the overall tax burden with this. If every dollar that would be generated by any expansion or closing of loopholes under the sales tax base, under the consumption taxes, would also have to eliminate the income tax burden. I think it's worth noting in here that this is just we keep saying income tax. It's really the personal income tax. This does not have any bearing on the corporate income tax, which is a separate tax. So the corporate income tax would stay in place if Amendment 5 passes. This only eliminates the personal income tax.
Kind of a similar question. You kind of addressed this earlier. Will any business or service actually lower their prices without being forced to do it? I've never seen prices go down without coercion.
Yeah, I got to answer
Price
that.
controls.
I got to answer that last one.
Yeah, prices don't go down over coercion. They go down because of competition. That's the best way to get the most value out of our economy is through normal competition, right? And a way to explain this is when you have more goods, more services, and when you stop, let me start here, when you stop penalizing the productivity of goods and services, you get more goods and services. When you have more goods and services, it drives down the price of those goods and services because there is a greater supply for an equal demand, which decreases the price. That's how prices come down over time. That's how value is created in an economy. That's why 85% of American homes have air conditioners now, when it was like 20% 70 years ago. It's because value is created and prices actually go down as more productivity is introduced into an economy.
One thing that I don't know that we emphasized, but that the governor has clearly stated, because he's said it in multiple speeches and State of the State addresses, is that I presume he will not sign a plan that doesn't include these things, because he has consistently said them over and over again. He wants 3 major exemptions in any proposal sent to him, and those exemptions would be on the broad categories of healthcare, agriculture, and that's the one he's probably going to have to define more clearly, because agriculture could mean a whole bunch of things, right? Agribusiness, and real estate. Would any of you like to just underline, highlight, explain that further?
Yeah, really quickly. Those are promises the governor has made. And they're relatively easy promises to keep for a few reasons. One, real estate already can't be taxed by that constitutional provision I already mentioned. 2, agriculture is actually a business input tax, right? And that's not a sales tax, that's not a consumption tax. It's a business input, so it would be called what's a value-added tax. We currently don't tax that. We won't be taxing that. It's not a part of the calculation because I'm vehemently against value-added taxes. They're not consumption taxes. And then 3, on health care, 42% of health care federally has to be exempted automatically. If you look at other states, they're not taxing health care. And so The idea of us not taxing healthcare, agriculture, and real estate is very much attainable, very much realistic, very reasonable promises, because half of that's not even calculated in the math.
All right, I didn't get this question, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it, ask it. You guys are going to hate me for it because it opens up a whole bunch of other issues probably. But we've gotten this at many other town halls. In what ways does Amendment 5 address, change, adjust, work around, exempt, forestall, delay, pause the Hancock Amendment? How does Amendment 5 affect the Hancock Amendment? Any portions of the Hancock Amendment, or does it not actually affect the Hancock Amendment?
It doesn't really affect the Hancock Amendment. It certainly doesn't suspend or undo the Hancock Amendment. The Hancock Amendment stays in place. It really doesn't even change a provision of the original Hancock Amendment. There was a change in the Hancock Amendment was done in 1980. There was a change to the Hancock Amendment, a small change in 1996, that basically created a margin for error. So what the portion of Hancock that says that the spirit of Hancock is, if government's going to get more revenue, if you are going to increase taxes allowing government to get more revenue, the voters have to approve that, right? That stays intact. Amendment 5 does not change anything about that. If we aren't increasing revenue, government doesn't necessarily have to go to a vote of the people for it. That's the way it is now. That has nothing to do with Amendment 5. And that is the way it will stay going forward. The only thing that is addressed in Amendment 5 is that provision that was added in 1996 regarding the margin for error. The margin for error, as it equates to today, is about $93 million. You can be off by $93 million in a revenue neutral, up to $93 million, without it undoing your potential tax reform. If we don't, and again, that margin of error would stay in place even if Amendment 5 passes. But just for the 5 years while we are doing the sales tax adjustments and the income tax cuts, we need some more space. $93 million is a lot of money when you're playing around with 1% on a sales tax rate, or you are talking about property tax, which is normally what Hancock applies to. It is a completely different ballgame when we're talking about $8 billion, which is what the income tax represents. If you want to change $8 billion, $93 million becomes a rounding error, and it becomes virtually impossible to actually deliver income tax cuts and expand the sales tax base and close sales tax loopholes, hoping to be within $93 million out of $8 billion. Which means if you get it off and you're $94 million off of what your proposal was, because of that provision in 1996, the courts could come in and invalidate the tax cuts that were done from that, because it would have been in violation of that 1996 change. The bottom line is, if government wants more revenue, they have to go to a vote of the people. If Amendment 5 passes, if we want to do anything other than be revenue neutral, we still have to go to a vote of the people. Nothing about that changes from Hancock.
Okay, we're actually right on time, and I've got through all the questions. Again, I'm going to let each of the three of you provide anything we didn't address, anything that maybe we didn't address or that's come up in other town halls that you feel is important to address. And then, as promised, these three fellows will stay up here, and you can continue to further interrogate them after we're done with the formal part of the program. And we have two other state reps here as well, and you can interrogate them as well, because they both voted for and supported this throughout. So, Dennis, any final comments, resources you want to direct people to, anything that did not come up in this town hall that has come up in others that you think should be noted tonight?
Well, the only thing...
It's a little funky. Just keep talking.
The only thing that I would say is, this is my fourth town hall in 3 days. And the town hall that we had last night was heavy populated with Democrats. And they walked in, and their opening comments to me were, we're Democrats and we're solid no's. And I said, why don't you just sit down and listen to the presentation and then tell us what you think? And they said, okay. At the end of the night, they came up and they said, we're probably yeses. All five of them. We had the same, and I said, well, can I get a photo of all of us together for, I'm going to call it my kumbaya photo? And they said, sure, let's do the kumbaya photo. So if you want to see the photo, come on up. And as they left, the woman, she was the regional director for the hospital, she said, well, Oliver is the #1 Democrat in 3 counties. She said, so if you got him to say yes, you're going to get a lot of Democrats. The bottom line here is this is a working person's bill. Like I was saying before, the senior property tax freeze, we only got 3 no votes out of 400 because people could cross the lines and they could see that it was a bipartisan bill meant to help all seniors. Wasn't Republican seniors, wasn't Democrat seniors, it was all seniors. And that's what this bill is about. This is about the people, the 2.8 million people that are going to work every day, working overtime when they can get it, to give them a chance to get a 5% raise immediately, right? Give them a chance to raise their families more comfortably and attract more business to build the economy and to build Missouri as a market, make us desirable so businesses want to move here, so our kids want to stay here, and other families like Cindy Jones will move here. That's our goal with this bill. And if you're just a naysayer and say, no, I'm not voting for it, nothing. I wouldn't vote for anything that a Republican would say. Well, that's not really a good reason. Because this isn't about Republicans or Democrats. What this is about is Missouri's families.
The last thing I would add is I just want to address one criticism that's been levied against Amendment 5 over and over again. Amendment 5 is not a blank check to government to do whatever we want with the tax code. There are some very clear definitions. And this is why I say if you remember one thing from this, read the bill and you will see a laundry list of things that government can't do with eliminating the income tax. And there are several bounds we have to operate within. What a blank check to government, if this is about a trusted, well, I just don't know if I trust them to get it right. I mean, all this says is we shall eliminate the income tax. We can close some sales tax loopholes. We may. That doesn't automatically happen. But if you don't trust government, why would you vote no on Amendment 5 and risk the fact that government maybe 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, goes back and increases the sales tax rate or increases the income tax rate back to 6% like it was before Tim was the Speaker of the House. And since Tim was the Speaker, we've gone from 6 to 4.7, thanks to tax cuts done by you, tax cuts done by Senator Koenig, and we can go past 4.7 all the way to 0 and lock it in constitutionally. Do not leave all the progress we've done on income tax in the hands of government because you're too afraid to put guardrails on them to force us to 0. If you don't trust government, that is reason why you should vote for Amendment 5. Lock us into 0. Don't risk a new legislature. Don't risk the Democrats getting control again, because one of the first things they're going to do is take us from wherever we are at that point right back up to 6% and beyond. And if you're worried about the sales tax, well, guess what? They can do that too. There is no constitutional cap on what sales tax can be right now. The fear-mongering going on around Amendment 5 are largely fears that already exist. Amendment 5 is the answer to a lot of those 5s by putting guardrails.
I think I would say a couple things. One is that this amendment is written in mind to be a benefit to every generation of Missourian. And it's something I was asked, I don't know how many town halls ago now, but I've repeated it at all of these town halls because it's worth repeating. Someone asked me, who benefits most from this? And I kind of really thought on it. I took a pause and I considered who is it that actually benefits most, because I think we see benefits together corporately as a government or as a state in a year and a half. I think we start to see investment. I think those pale in comparison to the benefits and the growth the state sees 4 years from now. I think we see even greater benefits 6 years from now and 20 years from now. But we see even better benefits 50 years from now. And so when I'm asked who benefits most, it is without a doubt whoever is born on August 5th after this passes on August 4th, because it's going to be the newborn Missourian that benefits the most from the trajectory that we now put Missouri on. A trajectory of growth, a trajectory of prosperity, a trajectory of a more transparent and more fair tax code. And lastly, what I would say is we're touring the state right now because this is a robust conversation. You're here right now because you've heard about this conversation. This is a campaign that has 41 days, 40 days. Yeah,
41.
41 days
41.
41 days left, and there's only so many people that we can talk with and talk to. And so if you walked in here with questions that weren't answered, we'd like to answer your questions. But if you walked out of here with answers and you're going, okay, I can support Amendment 5, I'm going to vote for Amendment 5, we ask that you help us. We need you to do more than just voting for Amendment 5. We need you to talk with your neighbors. We need you to talk with your friends, with your family. We need you to share that post or whatever it is on social media, because the difference is going to be made in town halls like these, and the difference is going to be made in the grassroots. And so I think that would be kind of my parting word, is if your questions didn't get answered, we're going to hang out here, and we'd like to continue answering your questions. But if your questions were answered, then we would like to ask that you join us in helping push this amendment across the line on August 4th.
All right, well, whether you agree or disagree with these gentlemen, I think you have to admit they know their stuff. If you guys can just give them a big thanks for being here tonight. And as they said, they will be happy to hang out and have follow-up discussions with any and all of you. And finally, I want to thank everyone once again. And to add to this murderer's row up here, I'll add Byron Keelan. Byron has studied this issue exhaustively as well, and he and his group, Freedom Principle, one of the larger grassroots conservative groups in the state, have endorsed this. He has a ton of information on his website, and in his former real life, Byron worked with multinational corporations all around the globe, so he knows a thing or two about tax policy. And so you can talk to him as well. If you don't like these three, you can talk to Byron. Byron's a nice guy. And finally, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Representatives Castile and Williams for being here as well. I want to thank all of you for being here. I know there's a lot of candidates here tonight, too. Thank you all for running. Thank you all for volunteering your time and your time away from your family. And I want to thank Oscar and James for live streaming the event. If you'd like to watch it again or share it, it's at the Show Me Sentinel Facebook page. And last but definitely not least, I want to thank Renee and all of the people that have restocked this office. And they open their doors for just about any and every right of center event that wants to be held here. They've had everything from trivia nights to fundraisers to mouse races to keg stands. No, maybe not that. But a big hand for Renee and everything that she does for our county.
Hey, Tim.
Renee, any closing comments? Of course.
I just wanted to say that there's yard signs in the back that you're welcome to take, and there's pamphlets. Okay, good. I'm sorry.
Renee's got lots of stuff she wants to get rid of. Yes.
I want to thank you all. I do have questions. I came in here negative about this, but I'm leaving positive on it, and I thank you. And we need to have more and more things like this. Thank you for coming, and I have a couple of introductions I'd like to have. Could the candidates that are running, could you all please stand up? We have Niall Stevens, Jim Bond, County Executive Candidate Dennis Hancock. On September 19th, the Republican Central Committee of St. Louis is proud to hold our fundraiser once again, and it is an awesome Lincoln Reagan Day dinner. It is at, where is it at? River City Hotel Ballroom. Price is $75. We haven't raised our prices for 4 years now. And over there we have items for purchase, and it helps support the office. And right there we have a fishbowl. We want to continue doing stuff like this, but if you have a couple of extra dollars to help support us, just drop it in the fishbowl. Thank you for coming. I hope you all come back again and drive safely.
Well done, fellas. How do we know what they're turned on?